Hey there, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you're having a good day. This video will talk about how I built a huge natural landscape with 16,000 KAPLA and KEVA planks. I'm sorry, but it's not often that I do these kinds of videos where I speak about my constructions, so I apologize if my voice or phrasing feels a little awkward. But for the next little while, I will explain the process of building a completely freestanding mountain with no glue or connectors. One of the key features of my creations is that I designed them with self-destruction in mind, and the goal is to have everything fall down beginning from a single domino line. For this build in particular, there is another system underneath the structure that adds some cool dynamic elements that I'll explain in detail. A couple years back, I designed this system that allows me to create realistic avalanches. If you arrange 28 planks in an octagonal formation, then compress the planks together, you can create a wheel that holds together by the friction between the planks. By weaving a chain of levers underneath a ramp, you can release multiple wheels in quick succession. It's basically the gist of it, and if you would like a step-by-step tutorial on how to build this system, please let me know in the comments. Anyways, let's get on with the building. In order to add an avalanche mechanism to this mountain, I needed a way to activate the levers from the floor. Now, how's it possible to do that with just wooden planks? Well, remember the chains of levers underneath the avalanche ramp? The same principle applies. I just need a way to stack the levers vertically. A few years ago, I designed an efficient way to transfer energy upwards, and I actually made a tutorial for that, so it's linked in the description. Those vertical lever chains are what those 3 holes in the back are for. Each chain will be activated by the dominoes underneath the structure. Immediately past the avalanche lever chains, I set up a snake of dominoes that will lead to the destruction mechanism on the left, which I'll explain later. The snake is there to ensure that there is enough delay between when the avalanche is released and when the mountain is ultimately destroyed. I don't want it to seem like the avalanche is capable of leveling an entire mountain, so precise timing is necessary. Unfortunately, I knocked the dominoes over while trying to fix the switchbacks. It's quite challenging to build dominoes with KAPLA planks on a bumpy floor, so I started building much more carefully. Once I covered the dominoes up, I started working on the destruction mechanism. Basically, I'm going to build a tall tower that will topple toward the mountain like a giant domino. I opted to use a herringbone lever chain to generate the force required to topple the tower, with the pivot structure in the back to cause the tower to fall in the right direction. Another reason I used herringbones is to conserve space, since I really need as much space as possible to move around. One of the main challenges I faced with this build was how to maintain enough working space, as I'll have to build the mountain in multiple sections in order to reach everything. The next challenge was how to lay out the destruction mechanism for the mountain. I set up one line of levers in the front and branched off towards the back of the structure. The middle branches were especially challenging as I needed to weave the vertical avalanche levers through the branches. These levers were extremely fragile and I had multiple close calls. When I got to the right side of the build, I noticed that the structure was not level as I was connecting the branches. This is because the ratios between length, width, and thickness aren't exactly 15 to 3 to 1. Upright planks are slightly too long, so this led to annoying height differences that were fractions of a plank thickness off. It's not really noticeable with small structures, but it can make a really big difference with larger projects. I had to add extra supports as I was building up on top of the levers. Once I built the structure to about 3 feet tall, I started building the avalanche ramp. I used the 3 vertical lever systems hidden within the structure to make the 3 avalanche ramps, so I needed to build 4 walls to encase the levers underneath each ramp. I had to be extremely precise with the placements of each plank to make sure that the system functions properly, but also so that I would not knock over another plank in accident. I made sure to build the walls at roughly the same height as the levers so that I wouldn't have to weave my hand through a jungle of upright planks. After I finished the levers, it was time to work on the actual avalanche. Since I made 3 avalanche ramps which each fit 3 wheels, I needed to build a total of 9 wheels, which works out to a 252 plank avalanche. The wheels were relatively simple to make, just that all planks needed to be interconnected and compressed together tightly on all sides. Unfortunately, my camera cut off the recording as I was building the snow-covered ramp, so I couldn't show me placing the wheels on top of the structure. Once I finished the avalanche ramp, I could finally begin landscaping. I built up the structure on either side to form the base of the mountaintops. I used KEVA planks to build the rocky parts of the mountains, which are not the same size as KAPLA planks, so I had to be really careful to make sure that the structure didn't become too unstable. Since I had 2 shades of gray KEVA planks to work with, I added gradients and texturing to the mountains with more white planks the closer to the top I built. If you're wondering why I didn't build the structure up from the bottom left corner, that's because I needed some space for the falling tower to activate the levers underneath the entire mountain. In hindsight, this was probably unnecessary, but I wanted to make sure that the force of the falling tower would propagate and set off the chain of mass destruction. And with that, the back of the mountain was finally complete. I then started extending the mountain's destructive levers towards the front of the building space. It should now be obvious as to why I designed the mountain to be built in 2 parts. The front half was thankfully much easier to construct a proper base for. I simply connected the first step of the new branches to the central lever chain. I made sure to be extra careful not to bump the domino tunnel while building the last branch to the right. I began building the structure upwards from the lever chains up to the height of the right branch. From there, it was finally time to extend the mountainside towards the front. I constructed the base of the mountain at varied heights to add more interest to the mountain instead of carefully measuring out a smooth surface. Then I finally started building more of the mountain. I was initially relieved to be done with the structure, but was then faced with the task of actually making the mountain look good. Terraforming can be pretty tricky, even when building in video games like Minecraft. But gravity doesn't decide that wood can't fall, but sand and gravel can. This wasn't my first time building landscapes, but I struggled to balance stability with looks. I could have made the rocks right below the avalanche a little less flat, but it will be partially broken up by trees and houses here soon. I actually started building the houses immediately, using the new light gray color which KAPLA released last year, and brown KEVA planks for the roofs, which I later changed to purple KAPLA. Since these houses are completely solid, they won't sustain much damage from the avalanche, but there will still be plenty of destruction otherwise. When I was building the terrain around the houses, I realized I wouldn't have enough green planks to fill out the whole landscape, so I used my remaining gray KEVA planks to build a boulder in front of one of the houses. I used a lot of tilted planks to cover up some of the odd gaps left behind, so I can minimize the amount of exposed natural tan planks. For the front of the mountain, I opted for brown planks since unfortunately I ran out of gray. But I figured since it's warmer at low altitude, I could justify using a different color. I also placed a few layers of flat natural planks at the bottom for when I build the beach in the front here shortly. I continued building the front face upwards until I used nearly all of my brown planks. This didn't quite get me up to the green planks, and since I nearly ran out of that color, I opted to use the new light green color that KAPLA also released last year. At first I thought it didn't really fit, but having a light green sort of meadow definitely helped to further accentuate the elevation gradient. And that was it. I can finally add the finishing touches. By this point I had worked for nearly 2 weeks on this project and really wanted to get it done. That's a long time for my cats to get comfortable around my builds, and they definitely caused some issues in the past. Once I finished adding trees to the mountain, I finally built the tower which will destroy the mountain upon release. I also added the letters TNT because, well, why not? I made sure to save the best for last. The beach was personally the most enjoyable to build. It was basically the calm before the storm of when I would need to set up the final dominoes. I added plenty of palm trees and beach equipment using nearly every color I own, including a little raft next to the white surfboards. But as with any self-destructing build, my time had finally come to remove the protective wall underneath the black X. Unfortunately, my GoPro recorded this nice and crisp footage right here, but at least it's better than nothing. And that was that. But before we set off the avalanche and destroy the mountain, let's take a moment to admire the 2 weeks of work I put into it. I will say I'm quite impressed by how the avalanche turned out. I honestly expected it to fail completely with the complex lever chain squeezed between tight corridors, but most of the white wheels barreled down and broke apart. Ever since my original KAPLA avalanche video from 4 years ago, I've been wanting to build something like this, and I'm happy it's finally become a reality. My only frustration is of course the TNT stack, and I honestly should have seen this coming. I had used the herringbone levers to conserve space, but they're only about 90% reliable, even less so when 2 chains are sandwiched close together. I probably got a little unlucky, but hey, at least I didn't miss the plank throw. As you can tell by the Christmas decor in this video, it's definitely come a little late. I'm not going to pretend I'm a consistent uploader, but I definitely had a lot of fun creating this video. Consider hitting that subscribe button if you want to be notified whenever I do post a video. Anyways, that's all I got for y'all. Thank you for watching and happy building.